It is that time. We'll be having our good friend here, Russell Brown, joining the show, which I'm personally excited for. We're getting things wrapped up, and he was able to take the time out. He's a busy man during this time of year, but Russell Brown joins the program, so I want to go ahead and welcome into the show. Russell, my guy, and you guys know Russell, of course, NFL draft analyst at Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros. He does work for the Lions Wire, 1027 The Fanatic, a Detroit Lions podcast. The man's heard everywhere, and you know him, Russell Brown. What up, Russ? How you doing tonight?
What's up, brother? How are you?
Dude, I'm good. We're very happy to have you on. We had Scott on last week, and I think this is the perfect time. You guys are crushing it. I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing. I want to start off by just kind of asking you, and I asked Scott this, and I'm curious for just your two different answers. Is there anybody that you kind of been just watching so far that you don't think is getting enough of a spotlight, maybe that Lions fans will fall in love with closer to the draft, but someone that stuck out to you?
I'm distracted. I got to turn off the comments here on the program. Everybody's comment, like, I'm getting big dick Russ here. Like, what is going on? You will be greatly disappointed. Let me just tell you. But no, Kamari Lassiter is the first player that comes to mind. I'm probably going to be higher on him than most players. And I know we're going to probably talk about defensive backs a little bit. But I think he's one of those, if he's there at 29, you kind of sprint to the podium. I don't know if he's going to be there. I think the league could potentially be higher on him. That means now he's going to go in the second round because I said that. But I think he's just a physical press man defender. He loves to initiate contact. I dropped a kind of film piece highlighting some of those tackles and the ability that he has in coverage. I just love the way he reacts, the way he closes. He's only 21 years of age. So I think when you look at the youth piece of it, you get a guy that you're going to be able to develop. And I think there's just a lot of potential with him. I love his skill set. Another player, Gabe Murphy out of UCLA, an edge rusher. His teammate, Latu, is definitely a guy that gets a lot of love, and rightfully so. But I really think when you watch Gabriel Murphy, he is just different from the prototypical 6'3", sub 250 edge rusher. The arm length is always going to come into play, but when you watch him, he's got a relentless motor. He works his hands so efficiently. He reminds me a lot of Alex Highsmith, who's part of the Steelers. So I love his skill set. I don't know if he'll be a first round pick. I think that's probably a little rich, but when you do like a mock draft simulator, he's sitting there at like pick 200. And I'm like, there's just no way he's going to be available at pick 200. I think he's going to end up becoming easily a top 75, top 100 pick after next week.
Oh, Kamari I knew Jeff had to say something about that.
I love this one. You know what, Russ? You go on, Booner. I wanted to just let
that. When you said that, I knew right away. I was like, that's Jeff's guy. Jeff's been talking about him for a few days now. He loves him. Hey, Russ, appreciate you joining. I have a kind of a specific player I want to bring up here, and I've been talking about him on our show a couple of days. And Nick, that we had on from the Honolulu Blues, I think you know him pretty well, but he brought it up as well. But you guys down at the Senior Bowl, Devondre Sweat was down there and kind of showed out a little bit. And I know Byron Murphy's like the big name there when it comes to Texas, but Devondre Sweat, Defensive Player of the Year in the Big 12, like that's a guy to me. I've been talking to these guys about and like really just kind of hyping up going in the second round, late kind of in that area. Do you think that's someone that Brad Holmes kind of targets, or what are your thoughts on him?
I think so. I mean, obviously we all know that it's about the interview room. So I don't know necessarily how he's going to interview. I've not heard anything as far as specifics as character wise, but I think the player speaks for himself. I think he is a guy that could easily be a top 50, top 60 player in this draft just because of the way he works his hands. And when we look at defensive tackles that are listed at, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", similar to how he is, and he's listed at 362 pounds, to see the movement at that size, it's ridiculous. And I thought there were times he flashed on tape where he just looked more efficient and better than Byron Murphy. And I think that's really what Detroit needs, just somebody that can go in next to Aleem McNeil. You don't need the guy to be better than him, but if you bring him in, I think you can plug and play him. He's going to be a force in the run game. You're going to have to put two blockers on him at a time, and that's going to free up McNeil or Hutch or Pascal, Kaminsky, whoever's going to play on the opposite side of Hutchinson. So I think it would be a great fit, and they might have to move up to do it, but I think when you look at what the draft capital is on day 2, we know Brad Holmes is going to get frisky somewhere. Is it first round? Is it second round? If it's the second round, I think Sweat would make a lot of sense if they wanted to move up there. So I'd be fine with it. I just want to put resources in the defense.
I love that. I love
Russ,
that.
and nice to finally meet you, by the way. But talking about the defensive side of the ball and needing resources, they just let go of Tracy Walker yesterday. And there's a lot of noise of CJ Gardner-Johnson potentially not being re-signed. So as far as in the draft, do you see Brad Holmes making a move for a safety, whether it's the first, second, third round? And if you do, what prospect kind of stick out to you at that position?
Well, nice meeting you as well, brother. But I think there's a couple of different guys. And it's funny, I've been thinking this for the last, day or so since they've announced that move. I do think safety and obviously corner both are needs in a sense. I mean, I know we have Ifeatu Melifonwu. We know we have Kirby Joseph. Do we bring back Gardner Johnson? It just felt like this team, the way that they were investing in the safety position, it just kind of felt like they were going to come out with more nickel and dime package looks. And they really stuck to their base and nickel packages. So I'm curious, do they look at that safety position? I'm with you. And if they do, I think Kalen Bullock from USC would make a lot of sense. I think he fits kind of the mold of defensive backs that they're looking for. 6'3", $185, $190. He had 2 picks and 7 or 8 pass deflections this year, but he's got really good range. He's got length. I think he's going to test really well. And it wouldn't surprise me if he actually ends up going sooner than probably where you're seeing him go today. I think after he tests and the things that he does, I think he's going to really stand out. Kind of a sleeper for me would be Tyke Smith out of Georgia. He kind of lives in the shadows of his teammate Javon Bullard, and rightfully so. Bullard would be another good fit. But I think when we look at the way the Lions like to use some of these safeties in this apex role and in that nickel role, I think Smith really stood out with the way he closed and the way he came upfield and attacked in the run game. I think in those split safety looks, those 2 high safety looks, he's going to probably carve a role out there as well. Size is the only concern with him. So if he checks in and he's a little bit bulkier, or he's able to test really well and he can add some muscle to his frame, I think teams would be very intrigued by him. And I think Detroit, we know how they work. Brad Holmes, he's working in the weeds here. So I think a player like that might just be off everybody's radar right now, but he ends up going, third round to us, and he ends up becoming a pretty good player.
Russ, thanks for joining us, brother. Love the hat. I haven't seen you in a minute. It's been probably since Jameson Williams got drafted, and that was quite the reaction we had that night. But
how drunk are we, huh?
Yeah. We're not going to answer that on here. Maybe let's do it again sometime. But, obviously, edge rusher, a position of need. Don't really know how much Brad values that as far as the draft goes and if he's going to sign someone. But this draft really doesn't have that much depth at the position. Is there really any guys that you've that have caught your eye that may fit what the Lions are looking for?
For what position was that? You broke up a little bit.
Edge.
Okay. I think it's very top heavy. I doubt Jared Verse or Latu or obviously Dallas Turner. I don't think that those guys become available to us. I mentioned a little bit about Gabe Murphy. I think he's an interesting one. He tore it up at the Shrine Bowl down there in Dallas. So I'll be curious where he ends up falling. But ultimately, I think a player that might fit is one that I saw at the Senior Bowl, and that's Chris Braswell out of Alabama. I love his skill set. The countering ability that he has it's just different from a lot of the edge rushers in this class. He's not overly big. I mean, we're talking a 6'3", 255-pound edge rusher, more power than speed. But I like the length from him. I like the way that he goes to power first and then is able to actually transition to speed. It's almost the opposite of those speed to power type of edge rushers. And then just the fluidity with his hands to long arm and then counter with an arm over move inside or outside. I think he's just different. And I think he would be a really good fit with kind of the mold and the defensive ends that they go with. I mean, we see them going with kind of these 6'3", 260, 265-pound defensive ends. Some are 6'4", 6'5", but you think of like Pascal, those day 2 defensive ends, Levi Ozarike, he kind of fits into that mold, and I think he's a little bit more fluid than both of those guys. Isn't really predominantly a 3-tech, a 4-eye, a 5 technique. He's going to play outside shoulder of tight ends and offensive tackles and just be a really good fit as an edge rusher. So I think it's, a little bit top heavy as far as edge rushers go when you got through the top 3. But I think as you go down, I think players like Braswell and Gabriel Murphy make a lot of sense. I did not mention Chop Robinson, and there's a reason for that. I don't see it with him. So if anybody wants to roast me in the comments, go ahead. But you're betting on a guy to try to get home all the time, and he did it 4 times, twice against UMass this past year. So that doesn't translate to success for me. But that's just me personally. I don't know.
No, Russ, I want to ask you too, because Scott brought up the idea of potentially drafting a tackle at 29 or trading up to get a tackle and moving him to guard, kicking him back out maybe after Decker departs. I want your thoughts on some of the offensive linemen that could be there for the Lions. And I know one guy that gets consistently brought up, the center/guard, Jackson Powers Johnson. I'll ask you first about Jackson Powers Johnson. Where do you think he goes? And is there any chance the Lions they'll be able to take him, or are they going to have to move up? And if they're going to have to move up, how much do you think they'll have to move up to get a guy like that?
Certainly he could be available. I mean, there was a lot of speculation last year after the Senior Bowl that John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota was going to end up being a first-round pick. He ended up going in the second round to the New York Giants. So obviously anything can happen if Powers Johnson, doesn't have a good 20-yard shuttle time or just doesn't look as fluid at the combine as he did at the Senior Bowl or on tape. There's a chance he slips a little bit and falls to our lap at 29. I am with Scott, and we both have agreed that we think offensive line is very much in play for us in the first round. I know fans don't want to hear that because of the defense, but at the same time, it's a need. I mean, we're betting on Taylor Decker to continue to stay healthy and battle through injury. The same thing with Frank Ragnow. Jonah Jackson, who knows if he's coming back? Personally, I don't think he is. I think if he was, he would have already signed, because from my understanding, he had a contract extension offered to him back in like July or August, and he did not sign. And then if they don't bring back Graham Glasgow, I mean, we potentially could need 2 starting guards. So offensive line is a sneaky need for this team. So is Powers Johnson there? There's a chance, right? I mean, but if he's not, and I don't think he will be, just simply because of the way that the trend has been going for him and everyone you talk to, he's the top interior offensive lineman in the draft. I look at Miami, I look at Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. I think in that range somewhere, he makes a lot of sense. Maybe even the Rams, just to give protection for Stafford and try to help that window that they have. But if they ended up not going that route with Jackson Powers Johnson, the guy that I could see at pick 29, he fits Dan Campbell. He fits Brad Holmes. He's kind of straight and narrow, head down, grinding type of guy. That's Graham Barton out of Duke. I love this kid. He's a 5-position, versatile type player. You'll watch him. He can play center. He can play guard. He primarily played left tackle for them. He does a lot of tackle over stuff, but he's a strong finisher. He operates so well in space. We were supposed to see him at the Senior Bowl. He did not actually participate in anything, but I think we'll see him at the combine. And I think he's one of those guys that he's going to test well. He's a former lacrosse player. He's just a multi-sport, good athlete that's strong, physical, aggressive. He fits everything that they're looking for with the gap and zone scheme that they run. So I think he'd be a great fit at 29.
Love it.
Russ,
my fault, Booner.
Another thing I have here too, real quick, is the thing that we've seen from Brad, especially the last 2 seasons, is him making these moves in the draft, like trading back to get Jahmyr Gibbs in the trade into the second round, like just making all of these moves. Are there a couple guys that you feel like kind of on your board that are like Dan Campbell guys where you're like, hey, he could trade either back in the first or kind of move up in the first? I know the Powers Johnson, or if they're even in the second round, getting back into the second round for another guy, because I know we have 4 top 100 picks. That's been going all over social media today. Like, do you see him actually making moves this year? Obviously, he doesn't have as many picks as he's had in the past, but I still feel like there's going to be a chance we see him do something on draft night.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know if he does anything in the first round. I would be really curious what he does on day 2 of the draft. I think is really going to be the sweet spot just because of the capital. And I don't think they're going to want to give up a ton of assets in the first round to move from let's say 29 to 18 or 19. I think that jump is too significant. But if he was to kind of move up, some players that just kind of stand out as potential Brad Holmes guys. At defensive back, Mike Sandstrel from Michigan, dog, right? I mean, Michigan fans on this show, they know all about him. The guy's just always around the football. You can discredit his size, but you can't discredit the player and the ability that he has on the field. 5'10", $180, 6 pass deflections, 6 picks this year. I mean, just big hits. Nickel outside corner, maybe a little overhang as a safety. There's so much to love with him. I could see him getting aggressive and moving up for a guy like him if he was their top ranked corner or defensive back on day 2 of the draft. The same thing with Max Melton out of Rutgers. I think he's a really talented player that I got to talk with and just very knowledgeable. I love the way he carried himself. His dad was a former player back in the day. His brother plays for the Packers. I feel like there's probably somewhere where Brad Holmes connects the dots to like there's probably some way that he's like connected to his dad somehow. It always seems to be that way with 1 or 2 players in every draft. I think Cam Hart from Notre Dame's another one, really smart kid, really patient, plays square, an outside corner. I think moving up for kind of those guys, if we want to get sexy, I mean, if Lions fans want something a little sexy, could I see them move up for like Brian Thomas or Adonai Mitchell somewhere in the first round? I could. I don't know how big of a need wide receiver will be in the first round. We have to obviously see what happens with free agency, but I could see them taking a liking to one of those 2 guys just simply because of the size. They're both 6'4", 200, 205 pound receivers that move really well for that size. They've kind of got that basketball movement. Adonai Mitchell is one of those guys that can cross guys over with ease with the way he runs his routes. He can big body receivers. So I love his skill set. I'm higher on Adonai Mitchell. So if they got cute and sexy on the first night of the draft, could it be for a receiver if Josh Reynolds is done, if Khalif Raymond is going to be out for even longer because of a knee injury and potential surgery or whatever happens with that? I haven't really researched on Khalif Raymond, but we got to pay St. Brown. We have a need for a receiver. So could it be something like that? I could see, that trade up on day 1.
No, and another guy, you just listed off a couple corners that you fell in love with, and somebody that I've fallen in love with as the draft process goes on is TJ Tampa out of Iowa State. Now, I'm really high on him. I think he's very fluid. He reminds me of Xavier Howard, just the way that he plays on the field. Because if I'm wrong and you're like, I don't really know about TJ Tampa, what do you think about TJ Tampa, and where do you think he falls in the draft?
I think it's a great question. I think I'm not going to respect your opinion on him. I don't like him as much as other people. Okay. Just the player itself, just the talent that I've seen. I think he's very fluid. I'm with you there. I think he checks off the boxes in regards to fluidity, getting in the hip pocket and being able to run with guys. But he was very similar to me when it came to tackling, very similar to Kalen King. I thought he struggled with that. I only watched 2 games on him, so I'm not as deep. So if there's a game where it's like he's laying people out, please point that game to me because I would love to watch it. I've only got 2 games on Iowa State defense, so I've only watched those 2 games. And there were just times where he just looked disinterested in tackling. And Kalen King out of Penn State was the worst tackling corner I think I've ever seen. Not trying to dog a guy from Detroit, but he was terrible. And Tampa was pretty close to that in the film that I had watched. But that does not mean he can't cover. If you need him to be a cover corner, that's what he's going to be. And I think if you took him in the second round, that's fine. I don't agree with him at pick 29. If they traded back and then they took him, I'm all for it. And he could be awesome. He could be Xavier Howard. I have plenty of swings and misses. So if he proves me wrong, cool. I just did not get as interested in his tape through 2 games as I was hoping, because I've seen the buzz, I've heard the good things, and I'm looking and I'm like, this isn't it, bro. So not discrediting you. That's my take on it.
No, that's fair, because at the same time, I wanted some more, because obviously I'm all on the hype train about it. So if there's a train, because I haven't really seen much pushback from him, so that's where I kind of wanted to get. So I appreciate that, and definitely will look into it more, because when I was watching him, he was making some big hits, but it was after the ball was caught. It never really was in the run game. So I'll definitely have to look into that more, to your point.
And Russ, obviously, he was on the St. Brown podcast earlier, Justin Fields. If you were in the Bears position, what are you doing with that first overall pick? Are you keeping Fields? Are you trading Fields? And if you were to trade him, where is the best landing spot or fit for Fields, do you think?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident in saying that Justin Fields won't be back, so I'm maybe a little bit biased in that. But I would, as much as I like Fields, and I know he's only 24, the fact that he's, getting into year 4 here, he's gone 10-28. That's his career win-loss record. He hasn't won enough games. I think the sample size speaks for itself. He doesn't make a bunch of big throws, and he's just one of those players that you take away his mobility. What type of quarterback is he? Not saying that's the bad thing. Mobility is very important for a quarterback, but I think when you have an opportunity to take a player like Caleb Williams, I think you have to just you have to roll with him, and you have to hit that reset button and take advantage of that rookie quarterback window of 4 to 5 years on that rookie deal, because you take Fields, or if you keep Fields and he ends up not being the guy, and then you have no quarterback, or you have to pay him. Now we're talking about paying him $30-40 million to potentially win you 7 or 8 games. I don't know if that's the recipe for success if I'm Chicago. So I think they're going to take Caleb Williams. I feel pretty good about that. I think if anything, they take a defender with that 9th pick, or they try to move that pick a little bit if there's a quarterback that ends up sliding, or they just feel like they can get some additional draft capital. But the longer they hold on to Fields, the longer the worse his value gets. And I think teams like Pittsburgh, Atlanta would be very interested in trying to give up a day 2 pick for him.
I want to ask you, Russ, too, before you go, just your thoughts, because I asked Scott this, and we talk a lot about J.J. McCarthy, and I know the first round discussion is heating up more and more. The more we talk about it, Russ, the 2 best fits to me are Denver and Seattle. But what say you? Because I think if you look at the situations in their own right, like you got Sean Payton, I think the type of quarterback JJ is, although I don't know if he's ready to start, maybe you disagree with that. I think the situationally with Sean Payton, what kind of quarterback he's looking for, I think JJ fits exactly what he's looking for. And then I think Seattle, for obvious reasons, the Mike McDonald connection, he knows JJ more than any other head coach does. But what say you on JJ? Where are you at with JJ and maybe the best fit for him in the first round?
I like JJ. I do. I can see why people have kind of fallen in love with him. I think he's, an underrated athlete. I think he's very mobile for his size, as far as, 6'3", 200 pounds. The RPO stuff that he does is very underrated. He does a great job holding onto that ball, making those edge rushers and scrape linebackers really bite on the fake, and then he pulls it and takes it. I think it's great. I think the arm strength is there. There's times where it looks limited. He doesn't always throw to the middle of the field, and he doesn't always have, the touch. He throws more fastballs than anything. He's got to get that changeup in there. But if there's a coach in the NFL that can get him right, I think it would be Sean Payton. So I would be very intrigued to see that fit in Denver. Personally, though, I've heard Minnesota. I heard that about 2 weeks ago coming out of the Senior Bowl, and Kevin O'Connell just being very admired by him. And I think when you look at what they did with Josh Dobbs and the uncertainty around Kirk Cousins, I think JJ in Minnesota with those weapons and potentially having a chance to build up that offensive line a little bit, I think it's a recipe for success in a fast-paced offense that can score some points. So I think Denver makes a lot of sense, but really if I'm a Lions fan, I'd be a little worried about Minnesota getting JJ just simply off of what I've heard. And I think it's a great fit. So I definitely think he's going to be a first rounder. I think he's going to be a top 15 pick at this point. Maybe I'm eating crow in a couple of months, but I really do think he's made more money himself by not being at the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl than Bo Nix and Michael Penix did by going to the Senior Bowl. So that's kind of where I'm at with JJ. And again, top 15, it almost feels like a lock at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think next year the Lions are going to have 2 rookies in your division and a second-year starter. Like that's where we're at. But great stuff, Russ, man. We appreciate you. I know you got to get out of here. You jump from one show, you're on the next show. You can hear Russ everywhere, man. He's the go-to guy for the draft. You can check him out. Again, like I said, he's an NFL draft analyst at Fantasy Pros and Betting Bros. And of course, he does work for the Lions Wire and 1027 The Fanatic. Russ, I appreciate you a ton, man. We got to get you back on here. You're one of the best guys I know in terms of everything, the Lions and the draft and offseason. So we got to get you next time, man. We appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Russ.
Appreciate it, guys. Keep grinding. Don't let people bring you down. Keep doing what you're doing. And we'll do this again soon. Appreciate it, guys.
Appreciate you, Russ.
Man, Russ is what a dude.
Legend, smart.
Taking notes.
I've got so many notes over here, like just a legend. Like